When Jesus told his followers that unless you eat his flesh and drink his blood, you have no life in you, they left. It was their expression when they first heard him say it. Yeah. Yeah, we have another one of those moments for some of you in this video, especially newer viewers. I've brought this particular teaching up a couple of times in the past. People always leave this channel when I do. It's interesting that when those followers of Jesus left, he did not go after them. Hey, wait a minute, guys. You're overreacting. It's not what you think. No. He let them go because he's not interested in followers who question what he says. Here's something that we'll never say to Jesus when he gives us an instruction. Whoa, 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 whoa. Wait just a moment there. No. He instructs. We say, I receive it, Lord. Don't quite understand it. Maybe in the future you'll give me some more clarity about it. That'd be great. But if you don't, that's fine too, because I trust you. Consider what you just said done. That's us to him. That's the relationship. But some of you are going to hear directly from him something that he said, and you're going to go, nope, don't want it. No, no way, no way. Happens every single time I bring it up. Now, this is in response to Julie's comment, the second part from last week. But before I tackle that, let's be very clear about something. So if you decide to remove his teaching, like the church does, you will know that you are violating Scripture. So before you storm out of here in a few minutes, and many of you will, let's take a look at the old generic timeline. The beast's arrival is a key moment that represents the start of that final phase. The church usually calls it the 7-year tribulation, but regardless of what we call it, the 70th week of Daniel or whatever you want to call it, or however long it actually is, they don't know. They don't know. Trust me when I tell you they're guessing. But no matter what we call it and no matter how long it is, you can't have that final phase until the beast has arrived. It becomes sort of a mile marker for us. So what must happen before he can arrive? War in heaven. There is no beast until there is war in heaven. The beast is not brought forth until Satan is cast down to earth. Oh, he's here now, but soon he will be cast out of heaven and become earthbound. Then and only then will the beast be brought up from the sea. This is why your church, your favorite mega pastor, your favorite prophecy teacher never talks about war in heaven. It's kryptonite to them. War in heaven destroys their idiotic, unscriptural timelines every time. But let's set that aside now for a second, because we're going to go inside the Olivet discourse. This is all pre-set up to Julie's other point in her comment. The Olivet discourse, that thing the church has robbed us all of. They essentially tore those pages out of our Bibles as they rightly divide them out of your life. So inside the Olivet discourse, we have two main colossal events. The destruction of the temple / Jerusalem, ending the old covenant. Ever wonder why your church doesn't say much about that enormous age-ending event? Well, you're about to find out why here in just a second. This event is present in all three versions of the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. All three versions also contain Jesus' instructions for those in the area when this event would begin, allowing them to safely leave. Pray that your flight is not in winter, and etc. This idea that one version is for the Jews and another version is for the Gentiles is a complete Kamala Harris level lie. It's just another cover their rear end fabrication. Do not fall for it. All three versions are dealing with both of these enormous events. The other epic event is the coming, which among other things contains the rapture of the church. All three versions have this event as well. These two events are separated by almost 2,000 years, but they are also connected in a couple of ways. Theologians understand this connection. And since they want to move this event into the final phase, what they call the 7-year tribulation, they know they also have to pick up both events because they're connected and move them both into the final phase. If they want to move one into the final phase, they have to move both into the final phase. So in their 7-year tribulation at the end, they want to put both of these colossal events inside the Olivet discourse, inside the 7-year tribulation, after the beast rises. That would make the temple a third temple. And they want the Antichrist, the beast, to go into that temple and commit the abomination of desolation. They want the coming inside the Olivet discourse to become the second coming at the end of the 7-year tribulation. They don't want this to be the rapture of the church. They want it to be the second coming. The problem is this event contains war in heaven, and war in heaven won't allow them to move these two events into the final phase. War in heaven keeps these events both taking place before the beast comes forth. If they want to move them here, they've got to get rid of war in heaven, and they do that. So they change war in heaven to a meteor shower. That's what those stars falling to earth are. And the powers in the heavens will be shaken. That's not war in heaven either. That's just some cosmic eruption of some sort. You can't move this event once you understand war in heaven is part of that event. The coming is here, and it's connected to the temple in the first century, the one the disciples asked about, the one Jesus was pointing to. Now look, if you want a third temple in that final phase, that's fine. Go get it and put it there. That's fine. Just don't get it from the Olivet Discourse, because the Olivet Discourse is not about a third temple. It's about that temple he just walked out of and now is standing on the Mount of Olives looking at and pointing to. If you can find scriptural proof, and there may very well be, I'm fine with that. Just don't try to pull it out of the Olivet Discourse. That's what the church is doing. You can't do that. That's not allowed scripturally. Now we're ready for Julie's comment. She mentions that it was her understanding, in other words, this is what she was taught, that the sixth seal is done from the perspective of those who were left behind. They were left behind, but now they're in heaven. That's the Gentiles nations that are standing there. They were left behind, but now they're in heaven. No, the reason they do that is because when the elder asks John, who are these people? Where did they come from? And John says, you know, sir. And the elder says, these are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They've washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb and all of that, and they're coming out of the great tribulation. The church does not want this to be the rapture then. Why? Because they're coming out of the great tribulation. They want the church coming out before the great tribulation. So they do a quick switcheroo here and say, oh, these are the left behind people. That giant mob of Gentiles, those were the left behind people. And they diminish then the impact of the sixth seal. The sixth seal is about the fullness of the Gentiles coming in. So how do they come out of the great tribulation then? Isn't the great tribulation in the final phase? And aren't we gone before then? How does that all work out? Jesus is going to tell you. So some of you, go ahead, when you storm out, have all the things you want to take with you. You don't want to storm out of a room and then realize, oh, I left my car keys in there. And then you got to storm back in, grab the car keys, and leave. So get everything you need to storm out with now, because some of you are going to want to leave this channel permanently when I show you how Jesus makes that in the sixth seal make some sense. Let's go to the Olivet Discourse. We'll take a look at all three versions following Jesus' warning to get out of the area when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies and the abomination of desolation taking place, which both happened in AD 66. First, Matthew's version. We are told, pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be, first century, For then there will be great tribulation. Yeah, he actually said that in the first century. Great tribulation in the first century, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. He said at that time, in the first century, when you see these things begin to happen in Jerusalem, there would be great tribulation. This is why the church tries to pick up the whole thing and move it into the final phase. They don't want the great tribulation beginning in the first century. But they can't move it because of war in heaven. So unless you already left, let's get confirmation from Mark's version that Jesus actually meant what he said in Matthew's version. Pray that it might not happen in winter. He's talking about your flight out of Jerusalem or the surrounding area. For in those days there will be such tribulation as has not been from the beginning of the creation that God created until now and never will be. There is no doubt that he said that. But is he talking about the conflict between Rome and Israel? No. Is he talking about what went on inside Jerusalem between 66 and 70 AD? No. Luke's version will shed the light we need to see what is really going on at this time. Now, clearly, something has happened. Something has happened at that time in the first century to cause this great tribulation that he says has started. Let's find out what it is before you storm out. You already stormed out? Let him go. For the rest of you, you need to see this and understand how poorly the church has handled prophecy and the misinformation and the lies and deceit that they have passed along to you. Luke's version says, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are inside the city depart, and let not those who are out in the country enter it. This is exactly what happened in the first century. Christian historian and early writer Eusebius said that the Christians did get out at that time. Luke continues, for these are days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written. So something is coming to an end. This is key to our understanding. What was written, he says. He's referring to the old covenant here. To fulfill all that is written, alas for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, because they got to flee. For there will be great distress upon the earth. So it's not something that's limited to just Israel. There's great distress on the earth and wrath against this people. He's talking about the Jews. At that time, there will be great distress on the earth, great tribulation and wrath against these people. And they, the Jews, will fall by the edge of the sword, which happened, and be led captive among all nations, which also happened. And Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And there we have it. That's the reason. That's the reason for the Great Tribulation. The times of the Gentiles was now front and center. The old covenant was gone. The only plan of God, times of the Gentiles. We're still in them. Remember the Great Commission, go into all the nations with the gospel. That was a full-on assault into Satan's kingdoms. That had never happened before, but it was happening now. And Satan had a response. Wars, and famines, and disease, and injustice, and martyrs. We'll have more on that in a moment, but take note of this. By placing the times of the Gentiles at the destruction of the temple, it superglues this event as well into place. You cannot pick it up and move it into the final phase. It belongs at the beginning of the times of the Gentiles. The times of the Gentiles has begun, and this event is taking place. You also, therefore, can't move this event because it's connected to this event by the times of the Gentiles and the tribulation. But let's go back to Matthew's version so you can see this connection yourself. After the Lord talks about false Christ will appear, and don't fall for it, he says Immediately after the tribulation of those days, he then describes his coming. The sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The day of the Lord has arrived, and the stars will fall from heaven. That's Satan and his angels being cast down. Why? And the powers in the heavens will be shaken. That is war in heaven. Then we see him coming in the clouds with power and great glory, and he sends his angels for the elect. But let's go back to this statement. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. What days? What is he talking about? Those days, the times of the Gentiles. When he introduced this idea earlier, he indicated that this time period would have an ending, a fulfillment, and we are now at that point. And Jerusalem will change, he says. It will no longer be trampled down by Gentiles, which is still to this day happening. Jerusalem of Jesus' day is still 90% Arab, and a few percentage points Armenian. It's being trampled down by Gentiles right now, but that is about to change when the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. They will no longer dominate Jerusalem. Something big is going to happen. Paul says something similar. He says there is a hardness or a blindness on Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. So the times of the Gentiles has an ending, and at that time something will change to the land of Israel and the people of Israel. And it will also cause war in heaven and cause the Lord to show up with his angels to gather the fullness of the Gentiles. We see all of this at the sixth seal. We see the Gentile nation standing in heaven with every last one of them coming out of the great tribulation. John acknowledges this in his introduction to the book of Revelation. He says they are in the tribulation. Back to the sixth seal. We see the Gentile nation standing there. You can't even number them. Only God knows the number. But we also see 12,000 from every tribe of Israel being sealed. They will go on to that final phase, deep into the seventh seal. This period of time, the times of the Gentiles, connects these two major events. But notice he doesn't say that the tribulation is ended. It's just ended for this phase of it. The tribulation continues on. Same at the sixth seal. We are coming out of the great tribulation. It never says the great tribulation has ended. It hasn't, but it's going to change as it moves into that final phase. It's going to get worse. But we are still coming out of the Great Tribulation because the Great Tribulation has run simultaneous to the times of the Gentiles. But all of this is going to change, but the Great Tribulation will continue on into the final phase. So why is this Great Tribulation that began in the first century unlike anything that's ever happened or will happen again? Because we are in the process of purging evil from his creation. It will be purged first from heaven and eventually purged from earth, and it will never happen again. This is what makes this time period and the next time period, that final phase, so important. We are purging evil from the earth. At war in heaven, it will be purged from heaven. And now, down here on earth, it will be purged from earth as well. Look, I hope at some point some of you will wake up and see that every time Jesus talks about prophecy, whether it's about the second temple in the first century or his coming, they find a way to pick it up and move it away. No, it's not. No, it's not for us. Wasn't in the times of the Gentiles. It's not for us. It's in the second phase. They pick up everything he talks about prophetically and move it into the next phase away from us. They do the same thing in Luke 17, starting at verse 22. That's also about his coming. Pick it up and move it. Do you think that's normal? That every time Jesus talks prophecy, the church doesn't want it? It's cult-like, and it's wrong, and it's sick, because we're not listening to the instructions that he has about that day. He gave an instruction to these people in the first century. He told them to anticipate the signs that he gave them, to pray about the event, and to do exactly what he said. And they had to do it under great calamity. There was a rebellion that had just taken place inside Jerusalem. The temple was being overrun by the rebels. And soon there would be the armies of the Roman Empire outside their gates. And this is the setting in which they would leave. He is using that as an example to us. He is also giving us instructions for our day. We are also leaving, but we're not going from point A to point B on earth. We are leaving off world. And he has very explicit and specific instructions for us. Read about them at the coming in Matthew 24, and at the coming in Mark 13, and the coming in Luke 21. And after he describes the coming, he gives you some instructions. Listen to them. Go to Luke 17, starting in verse 22, and listen to what he says. That's also his coming. The church has moved this all away from you. Take it back. Don't let them do this to you. They're doing it without correct provocation. They're doing it because they just can't get it to match up with their prophecy narrative. Don't let them get away with it. Take it back. It's your teaching. It's your Lord. Take it back. Because he is telling us on that day this. He says, on that day, be ready to lose your life down here on earth. Don't try to save it. If you try to save your life down here on earth, you're going to lose it. But if you lose your life here on earth on that day, you'll preserve it. What's he talking about? A woman left a very good comment in that past video, a different woman. I want you to see it. She says, my Dutch Bible says, well, isn't that nice? She stops making sugar cookies for a couple of minutes and reads her Bible. Good for her. Whoever shall seek to save his life shall lose it, and whoever shall lose his life shall renew it. I like that because in the Greek it says to make alive. Nice connection to the rapture. Well, because of her comment, I said, I better take a look at it too in the Greek. She's talking about this word right here, preserve it. If you lose your life here on earth, you will preserve it. It's a very interesting word. Literally means begin to birth. What he's saying is, on that day, if you lose this earthly life, you get a new life. But if you're not ready to go, you won't have that. You'll lose that opportunity. You'll be like Lot's wife. There's a new life, a new born again. We were born again spiritually when we converted, of course, placed our faith in the Lord. But this is also another, we're going from corruptible to incorruptible, from mortal to immortal, the twinkling of an eye moment. That's what he's talking about here. We don't want to lose this opportunity because Sardis isn't listening to him. And because they aren't, when he shows up, I believe this is what he's saying. You won't even know it's me, and I will come upon you as a thief. When this enormous event takes place, you won't even know what is happening. That's the danger of not having his information going in to that, the most important day of your life.